Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the City of Meridian Solid Waste Advisory Commission regular meeting for January 26th. It is now 4 minutes after 4. And we'll start with roll call. Please indicate if you are present or connected to us by video. Mark Nelson. Present. Steve Corey, here. Scott Walters. Here. Sean Keating.
Present.
Tom Audie.
Here, I'm on the phone.
Meg Larson.
Here.
Karen Richmond. Rand Spivak. Kaylee Philippi.
Here.
And ex officio members, Rochelle Klein.
Here.
And quorum being present, we'll go ahead and start on with the business. First on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And it's been noted to me, we still had Isabel Cow on the attendance list. That'll be picked up in a future deal. But are there any other comments or changes that need to be done to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved as written. Further comments? Comments? Very good. Then we'll go ahead and vote on that. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Thank you. And next on the agenda is approval of the October 27th minutes. Are there comments on the draft minutes?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the minutes from October 27th as written.
It's been moved and seconded that the draft minutes from October 27th be approved. Are there further comments? Further comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the draft minutes for the October 27th meeting signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Thank you. And that allows us to move into staff program reports. The first quarter of fiscal year 2022 has completed. Happy New Year to all. And so we'll go ahead and do a quarterly report for 2021. And Sayard, you have the podium.
So this is actually the calendar year. And then we'll do I'll do the quarterly report next month. This is just a quick overview of kind of what went on in year 2021. Talking about the tonnage report, and then I'll go into events that we recently had. So here is just kind of a snapshot of the 2021 year. If you look at the left-hand table in blue, that just shows per month the total tonnage throughout the year. And we've had some dips, but in general, the average has been 474 tons per month. And then down below, I just see this in, the glass is pretty constant for the tonnage. And then you can compare that to the right-hand table, which is up top in the orange is the households who use recycling. And then down below in the gray are the tonnage per household. And we can see that it's pretty stagnant. Households have increased slightly. Households with recycling have increased, looking at the difference between December and January, 1,500 households. And the tonnage has kind of been plateaued. And then just I threw this in here, our curbside diversion rate is 12%, and that's pretty similar to the overall diversion rate if you look at curbside, commercial, and industrial. It's around, except during the leaf season, it really bumps up to 18%, but in general, the average is 12. The next slide, just looking at the Meridian transfer station, it's a little bit more volatile than the curbside. And it looks like we just commingle, so that's not without glass, so that's the orange. That's a little more steady, though. In August, it took a dip and then kind of went back up. And then on the flip side, looking at glass, which is the blue line, that's a little more volatile, and it's obviously heavier, so that's why we have more tonnage on the glass side. But it jumped up to in August, 49 tons. And do you have maybe a reason why that is, a rhyme or reason, or just this is how it is? Rochelle?
Mr. Chairman and Sarah, I actually don't, it's one of those materials that sometimes people save it up and then, and when it's warm, more people use the drop site than when it's cold. But my guess is just we just saw a big pulse of people dropping off glass, but nothing particular, like no holidays. Usually we see increases around holidays and, being in August, unless it was the end of July that they brought it in, it was counted, it was hauled in August. That's a possibility too, is that they saved glass in July and it was just hauled later, but nothing notable.
And then obviously there'll be a big jump, but just looking throughout the year of curbside and drop off grass and leaf, obviously there's nothing at the beginning since it's trash. And then in April, it's, the grass season starts. And then you see in October to December, the leaves really increase the yard debris diversion. And then moving on, does anybody have any questions about just the tonnage report? I will, so next month, we'll get the quarterly, but then, you guys have your annual report and I'll also work on mine. And then that would be more extensive, the information about looking into the details of, households and other data. Okay, so with that, leaf recycling program, that's the fall leaf. So the drop-off collection, that was from October 18th to December 3rd. We had 9 park locations, including the transfer station and the landfill. And there was around 200 tons collected. I'm not sure about the contamination. I think it was low this year. Okay, and then curbside collection ran shorter just from November 1st to November 19th. But that netted, 609 tons diverted from the landfill. And on the right-hand side, pictures, so this, last year, we did a 20-yard roll-off, so you can see, you can walk inside and put your bags down. And I think that made it easier for people. And we also had sandwich boards kind of explaining what you can and can't do. And then we also had, again, the 10-yard at other locations. Depending on the location, we had either a 10-yard or a 20. And then just looking at the years from 2019 to 2021, 2019, we only had curbside leaf collection, so that was 466 tons diverted. And then 2020, we started doing the drop-off. So, but a lot more, 731 tons curbside leaves diverted and 208 drop-off. And it was noted that 13 tons of the 208 were contaminated and had to be dumped as trash. And then just this recent year, a little bit less curbside, about the same at the drop-off sites. But would you say less than 13 tons of contamination for this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. That's closer to the real diversion rate. And then lastly, this was just a quick pilot project just to see how things would flow. What are some things we need to work on for next year. So we did a holiday light recycling pilot project. This ran from December 8th to January 15th. It was just located at the transfer station in the recycling area. And it was not advertised that much. We just wanted to get the word out, but more interested in the process. So in the park's winter spring activity guide, it was advertised, social media, and on the city website. And this is kind of what, when you drove up, this is on the right-hand side, what it looked like. Republic Services was nice enough to get some magnets for us and then brought out the sandwich board. And I'm not sure exactly, but I bet it would fill a 55-gallon cart. So that's probably the smallest cart is about 35 gallons, so a cart and a half. And then the lights are sent to Pacific Steel and Recycling, which they were really thrilled to get them. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions about the program events part?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Sayard, can I just tell you that I love the Christmas lights collection piece, and I would love to steal that for the landfill. I think that's one of the greatest ways to keep things that we don't want out of the landfill, and a great way to get higher use out of recyclable product. I thought that was fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, and I look forward to working with your outreach coordinator to maybe get that going there and other places.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the leaf collection sites, I didn't want to use the paper ones. They're just so small. I used contractor bags, filled the back of a pickup truck up full of those bags and went to Settlers. The way you set them up was great. You could just pull up right next to it. But I'm not 6'7", so I stood in the back of the pickup, lift over and empty those bags, because they are not biodegradable or compostable. And I watched other people come up with the same problem where they didn't have a truck to stand in, how to empty those into that big green ones. At least the Settlers were large. So I went back and did some homework trying to figure out what other option do we have and what we might consider for next year. Chairman, if I give you 2 minutes, I'll show you what I found. I went to 2 companies, one called EcoSafe, one called BioStar, to see what they might have in the way of a larger, lighter weight, stronger, less expensive bag than the current paper ones we have that really don't fit anything but a rack that you can buy to fit it. I wanted to find something that would fit our current cans, whether you use a garbage can, a recycled can, or a leaf can, our rolling ones, one that would be big enough to fit it. So I had both companies ages ago now send me these. That's one bag. 60-gallon bag. And they will fit. Will fit in one of our rolling ones. They are fully biodegradable and fully compostable.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. For those of us that are virtual, I don't think we can hear Mr. Spivak at all.
I'll get closer. These are fully compostable and biodegradable. They hold 60 gallons where the paper ones say 30, but by the time you try to fold the top down, you might have 25 was that cubic feet or pounds or whatever it is, cubic feet, I believe. This will hold half its weight in water without not the leaking, without the bottom tearing out. I was concerned they're so thin and lightweight. Would they really work? Grab yourself one and you can take a look. The other companies are very similar in cost. Home Depot, Lowe's, they look to be around 52 or 53 cents a bag for the paper ones. 26.6. That's a roll of 50. Look at what a stack of 50 paper ones look like. I'd sure like to see if we can't work with Republic to see if these would be acceptable as an alternative to the paper ones, and then how could we get them so they're retail available. Each of the companies sent me a box about yay big with, I think, 250 bags in it. I had all my neighbors and some relatives all try them just to see what they thought. But I got into this really after the heavy leaf season, but it was interesting to see what they would do. Now, a stake or a stick, a sharp-ended stick will puncture them if you're not careful, but they don't tear. It just punctured them. So it's something to consider for next year, and it might even have a larger number of folks use them, and they're easy to tie at the top, tie a knot in it, you heave it over into our locations and not try to throw the paper ones and then have leaves come out and fly all over the place. So that was one of my projects between last November and tonight that I thought I'd share with you.
Thank you. Can I, well, let's see. Do you want to go ahead and respond to that right now, or do you want to just take it back and look at it?
I know, Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Rochelle.
Dr. Spivak, I'm happy to respond. We can certainly take these. So really, it's not our decision on the programming. We have to have the end site that can accept them. And I know that Timber Creek did a significant amount of research on bags and like compostable bags before we landed on paper. That being said, I know they're constantly looking at opportunities. So we will absolutely take these back and see if these would work. And I know we did some research with Washington State University at their compost facility. And some of these bags, I don't know these brands necessarily, but they shred, but they just don't break down in the same like 90 to 120 days that we usually start. We see there'll still be a lot of remnants. And so a lot of it was just how long it would take these to break down. But we can certainly talk to Timber Creek and maybe run a pilot and just maybe have like, X number of users use them this next year and see if they break down and work through the process right before we go big, go big. But we're happy to chase that down and look to see if that's an option.
Mr. Chairman, I asked those same kind of questions to both the representatives from these two companies, one in Carolinas, one in North Dakota. And I asked about time and heat in a landfill. I'm not sure what the average heat is once it's been buried, but these completely degrade in 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Paper lasts a lot longer. So they degrade faster than paper. As far as shredding, they're more visible because you'll see what looks like a little piece of plastic versus brown paper tied in with brown leaves. So you wouldn't want to grind them up and use them in your flower bed. But for those that are going to the landfill, it's a whole lot less work for Republic with one bag holding 60 pounds versus one bag holding 30 or 30 gallons. So it had all kinds of advantages and was half the cost.
Chair, can I ask?
Oh, one last thing. And both companies will imprint on those bags at no additional cost. City of Meridian, leaf collection bag, they'll do whatever we want on them. And even if they're sold retail at Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or whatever, they have no trouble changing the ink and making it say whatever you wish. And they do meet, was it CMI standards? There's two organizations that look at compostable and that they meet all those standards.
Yeah, it looks like it meets BPI certification, so that's really important. The main thing is the compostable bags, you can't leave them out very long because they will disintegrate. So if you have one in your backyard and you pick it up, the bottom might fall out. But these look like they have been registered. Yeah.
And the other thing, I guess, just to be aware of is the weight of them. So they could get if the leaves get wet, which a lot of times they get snow and wet, if they're dry and fluffy, it's great. But when they get wet, they get pretty heavy. And so that would just be a concern from a safety perspective, though. The paper bags are a little bit smaller, so even when they're wet, they get kind of mushy and heavy, but they're not too heavy. But we can definitely talk to Timber Creek and look at maybe piloting these bags and see how quickly they
These
degrade.
can be filled as much as you want or as little as you want, and then you just tie them. And just for the heck of it, I filled them from anywhere from half to all the way to the top where I tied a small knot and sprayed them with my garden hose and left them out in the yard to see what would happen. They were there for 2 or 3 weeks. Nothing happened. So they didn't just disintegrate. I did the same with paper bags, and I had a mess. Okay, anyway, that was just a piece of information.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, Rochelle, can I go ahead and assign this to you to work with Mike to go ahead and find out and then maybe report back to us, say, by April or May? And Sarah, do you want to go ahead and be fully involved in that activity? Okay, and so the three of you, if you could go ahead and prepare for us a report by April or May on.
I'll share with you my contacts and correspondence.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner.
That was fun.
Are there further comments on the material that Sarah's presented to us? Seeing none, we'll move on. The next thing is events and holiday light recycling project updates, but I'm betting that was embedded in what you already just presented.
It was, yeah, it was one PowerPoint.
Excellent. And I definitely wanted to highlight both of those. Definitely, in the county meeting today, listening to the various people, which I'll talk about a little later in this meeting, it's really nice to be able to point out that Meridian has collection facilities throughout the city for people to drop off. And it's definitely a wonderful thing to go ahead and have our own initiative, the holiday light string collection. Sayre did a great job on this thing, and I think that's going to be picked up by the other communities. Meridian's leading the way again. So with that, we'll move into new business. And primarily what I wanted to do at this point was to take some time on the annual report. And every November, December, I pull together the information with staff to go ahead and make sure that council has on record something that discusses what we've done in the previous calendar year. It's become pretty routine. And in fact, in the past couple of years, I think I've just tweaked it to bring it up to date and submitted it. But based on the transition that we've had for the commission, having staff come on board and other things, I thought a little bit more rigor was appropriate at this particular point. There's two items on the list here. First off, just a general discussion of anything that you had on the draft report, understanding that what I did not have, amongst the things that I did not have, was the recycle a bicycle. Thank you, Rochelle, for giving me a quick blurb on that. I will insert that. And having said that, there will be an update on the draft, so feel free to go ahead and mention anything. But after we get through with the general discussion of the report, then we'll go ahead and focus on upcoming commission business. So at this particular point, if you have any comments on the report in any portions of the report, they'd be appropriate at this time. And I can appreciate that because this is pretty much just a record of what we did. Probably the biggest thing would be if there was some activity that we did that I missed. But of course, due to COVID, our activities have reduced a bit. So that's less of a risk now than it was a couple of years ago. And hopefully that risk will rise in the future. Any additional comments on the draft report? Okay, we'll kind of move on because I think the next one's a little bit more important at this point. But if you do have something that comes to mind later, email it to myself or to Sayard, and we'll go ahead and address it and bring it in. Indeed, that's kind of particularly the case for the upcoming commission business, section J of the report. And these items have been probably carrying on with very minor change for the last 3 or 4 years. But certainly a lot of the activities associated with the spring cleanup and trash or treasure and the leaf collection and such, it's been really nice to go ahead and have city staff picking up all of this effort, which kind of maybe works out well with the commission, and we're happy to go ahead and continue where we along the path that we've been going on some of the other activities. But maybe not. Maybe there are some things that commissioners would like us to start focusing on, maybe emphasizing outreach or whatever else. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and open the floor to anyone that's got any comments on upcoming commission business and things that they'd like us to consider.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Tom. All right.
I think as for upcoming commission business, I think it would behoove us greatly to really emphasize partnering up with stakeholders that are outside of the city to kind of, I can't think of a good way to phrase it, but to have one succinct messaging that is the same for all of us, so that people don't have some of the issues that we've seen where people say, well, when I came here, the rules were this, and now they're this, this, and this. I think the commission focusing on coordinating with other stakeholders and to a lesser extent assigning staff to do so would really be a great way to improve messaging throughout the county and to a greater extent within the city of Meridian. We can utilize the outreach resources that all the stakeholders have to get a more impactful message.
Thank you.
I have something to say. So I think that we should emphasize outreach more towards like younger people. Like I really liked how the thing you showed last week, like the story walk, I really liked that. And like I don't know what it would look like yet, but like just focus more towards like the youth and like younger people. If that's like I just think that's something we should consider looking at.
I have a question, Chair. Do you have like an idea of what type of platform, what do you think work best in youth? Are you talking about maybe kids or maybe younger adults?
Like, yeah, like younger adults, like in schools maybe or something. Because like I know at my school, like I rarely see a recycling bin. It's kind of ridiculous, but so yeah, I don't like more towards, yeah, younger adults, I would say, like high school, like.
Thank you.
I just had one little item. I think I brought it up quite a while ago. It's been a long time, but just perhaps, people that are buying homes and, either new to the community or have lived in the community for a long time. I still think there's some confusion as to what can be recycled. And sometimes I'm even emailing Rochelle and asking her different oddball things. But I think an outreach to real estate firms, because when you buy a home, you're given a packet, and there's typically nothing in that packet about recycling, and your bins just show up. And so there's never anything in that packet. So I thought that, when somebody's getting into their home, that might be a useful tool, because especially if you're moving from a different state, half of the things that were recyclable there are not recyclable here. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, question for Tom and Taryn. Tom, is that what you were getting at in terms of coordinated outreach or something else?
I'm okay with that, and that's fine. If what I've heard is 3 different things that focus on outreach, and maybe that's what our focus as a commission should be, is on education and outreach. And then these 3 different paths for doing education outreach, that's great. Like I said, I just wanted this opportunity for commissioners to feel like if there was an activity or if there was a communication pathway that we had been ignoring, this was a time to remind us and me of it, so that we can get it into the report and we can kind of start focusing on the activity. With that,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Rand.
comment about providing information to new homeowners, I think it's great. Rochelle, what percentage of our red tops have that 20 by 20 or 24 by 24 decal on the top that say you can recycle this, and this with pictures? Because I have one, but I don't know if all of them have those or not.
Mr. Chairman and Dr. Spivak, they all have the end mold label, but we've been in the process, I would say probably 3 years ago now, we updated it to include all the new materials. So some of them are the lids are outdated. So we do have decals that we've ordered to start putting over the top of the old decals, like stickers. But the problem is when it's wet or it's really cold, they don't stick very well. And then when it's really hot, they get really bubbly quickly, unless you're really good at putting on decals. So we have to hit the spring and fall for putting them on. But yes, we want to make sure everybody's got the right information. They've received stuff in the mail or online through Meridian Trash Talk or things like that. But actually seeing it on your cart makes a big difference. And so we do have those decals, and we have a team that's systematically working through existing carts to make sure they're updated. And all the new ones coming in certainly have the new updated information. But that is a target area of outreach for us, is when the weather is good to get those decals on. And maybe Bob can add more. Is that more of a late spring, do you think? We have all the decals at the transfer station. And we had even talked about including like mailing them. We weren't sure how many people would want to be responsible for putting their own decal on. We talked about different ways to get them out to people.
Could you bring us a set next
Mm-hmm.
meeting?
Yep. Yeah, I can bring you some.
I was also working on talking about decals, one that's specific to Meridian, so that's something that's in the works as well. But I guess I had a question. Some of this outreach ideas, but I was wondering how you go about doing the outreach. Would you guys want to create stuff, or maybe look towards other communities? And another idea is to kind of mimic what Rand did, is bring other options of collecting materials. So if there's another way that you can collect different materials, such as, we have the bike collection. If there's some other materials that you find that we're lacking a diversion outlet, that might be something that the commission can consider looking into.
So like what I was saying, like towards like younger people, I think like something like social media or something, because like I don't know about, like I don't like check the mail or anything. Like everything I do is like online, like on the computer, on my phone. So something that like maybe like social media or like online, or yeah, something like that, like digital outreach.
Even tagging onto what I mentioned before is contacting, maybe via email or a different avenue, contacting some of the larger HOAs. There's some really big communities here, and they have their own newsletter. Like I get a newsletter every month from my HOA. And so there's some huge communities here.
Mr. Chairman, I think the mayor's office keeps tabs on all the HOAs, right? Don't they have the list? I think that is a possible like outreach opportunity for us. Maybe Sarah or Joanna know more about that.
Yeah, I think they might. If not, we can get a list and, add to, reach out to them. That is something that hopefully in the coming, well, it would be year 2023, we can do more outreach. Right now, it's just kind of developing a plan and like what type of outreach that the city can do, and then moving forward from there.
Mr. Chair, one of my other volunteer jobs is giving volunteer assistance and training to HOA boards across the state. There's about 1,244 HOAs in Idaho, and 60% of those 1,200 here in the valley. I think I've done about 160 one-on-ones with boards doing training. Have one tomorrow night. I went to the Secretary of State records and downloaded the entire database. People there were happy to give them to me that have addresses, board members. They didn't have email, they had physical addresses, and did some contacts and then got back email addresses. The other good way to do it is through the HOA management companies. There's a handful of them, and many of them manage the websites for the HOAs that pay them to do their accounting records, fee collections, penalties, and things like that. So it's not hard to get out to that volume of people. 67% of voters live in an HOA, 74% of residents in this state live in an HOA. So you can cover a lot of ground with just a contact list. It was an Excel file they sent, and you did it for free. They didn't mind at all. They just sorted it, and then I got the data and resorted it. You can pull out, extract by addresses, by zip code, area code. You can do it any way you want. So it's easy to get that out if somebody will do something with it. And the other two sites, Neighborhood Next Door, and these, some neighborhoods use a closed group Facebook page that they could also put it on if they don't do a formal newsletter. So there's lots of ways to get information out.
Mr. Chair. Mayor, the It Starts at Home program, there's the long form solid waste and recycling video. And I think that there's quite a bit of content in there that could be reused and cut down and spliced down to a 15 or 30-second PSA or something that's lightweight that can be posted on social media, et cetera. So I can help you look at that sometime if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. So, and I also have a question for Rand. Are you saying that maybe the commissioners could do trainings at the HOAs? Like it'd be like train a trainer, like I would train you guys and then you would train the HOA boards to give presentations to get the outreach? of
Normally, these
recycling?
boards meet quarterly or monthly, not much less than quarterly. And you might contact them and ask that if we can speak to their board about recycling, trash collection, et cetera, et cetera. And boards that I've talked to have been very amenable to finding out information and then sharing it with their homeowners, especially the ones that didn't know it. And they, and many of them have a welcome package, welcome to XYZ neighborhood. And they could have something from us in their welcome package.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, what I'm definitely hearing is focus on outreach. So I'm not sure if there's any additional comments that need to kind of come in at this particular point. Obviously, the door is always open and you can contact me outside of the meeting, but thank you for that input.
Mr. Chair, yeah, definitely outreach is important to, because it's continuous. We keep getting all new people and churning them around. Just curious if there's specific pain points that the city notices or public services. If we're doing better or worse on things like household hazardous waste, communication to the communities, or, I mean, what stands out as outreach topics?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Nelson, I would say that we just what to recycle, it seems super basic to all of us because we know. I would say I really focus on some of the basics, and then things that really help us on the street are things like cart spacing, super simple stuff like not overfilling your cart, because then when the claw grabs the cart, then it spills. And so just things like making sure your waste is in your cart, making sure that your carts are spaced out, and making sure your carts are in the street with the wheels against the gutter, like little simple things that we all know being involved with this, but a lot of our folks don't know those things. And Meridian, when this program launched, it was all on the sidewalk. This whole program was launched on the sidewalk. So we're still facing, a lot of folks who don't realize that the carts need to be off the sidewalk and in the street now. So, I mean, I think there's an opportunity there to do the yeses and nos. And then definitely our company focuses on empty, clean, and dry to make sure, the things that are being collected are not contaminated with food waste and liquids and things like that. So I think some of the basics are still really good. And then the reuse stuff, I think that the city of Meridian is amazing with the Trash to Treasure program and the Meridian transfer station as a, diversion opportunity to take materials there. So I think just, I'm always surprised at a number of people that don't know about weekly hazardous waste collection, the opportunity to recycle large metals at Meridian transfer station, things like that. So I like the idea of outreach for younger people because I think that's a missed opportunity. I have a few younger people in my house and they use like Instagram. I wouldn't even know how to put something on Instagram. Like, I think that we would have to figure out, you guys probably are all on that, but I think that we need to ask young people like how you get your, like when you say, is it Snapchat, is it Instagram? Like, how do you guys get news in high school? I think that we have to be willing to be a little more nimble. Sayard could be really nimble.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Nelson. Just as a recommendation, one of the things that we've learned is kind of this concept of high, wide, and deep with communication. We have a very diverse community, so some people will like the social media. There are still people that would rather get a phone call or a text, and drip marketing all the time helps get the message out. And, one of the things that Rochelle didn't bring up is that some of the scheduling stuff this year, having holidays on weekends, you would not believe how much of a challenge that was for us just to stick with your schedule, those types of things. And then you just do a little bit at a time, people start to pick it up. And we're definitely willing to make recommendations and get on some sort of a cadence with how we do, outreach. And then I did want to bring up too, Tom brought something up earlier. Treasure Valley is a tight community. I've been here almost 2 years now. If we leak something out in Meridian, I will get a phone call from somebody in Caldwell going, hey, how come we're not doing that? Or it's a different program and not everybody understands different contracts. And so, with some of this, the more we can work together, it helps in the communication across the board. And we're definitely willing to participate in that. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Nelson too, I think Commissioner Keating brought something up a couple meetings ago, which we should keep on the outreach, I guess horizon, which is also commercial outreach. There's a lot of low hanging fruit with businesses to get some of them recycling more and diverting waste from the landfill too. So, I mean, we could look at it as twofold, residential and commercial.
Thank you.
Again, the subject doesn't actually close. You can go ahead and drop me a note as we go forward, but unless there's no further comments, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item so we don't keep you after hours. Next is stakeholder updates, and what I put on the agenda here is the county SWAC meeting, which occurred earlier today at 10:30. And always trying to keep you up to date. Indeed, the county has heard us. The proposed rates were adjusted. And so the transfer station rate is proposed to be staying the same. The county made it very clear that their main goal at this point is to extend the life of the landfill. And I think to the extent that they're going in that direction, that's something we can be supportive of. They're going to look at different aspects of the rate structure that go ahead and encourage that. I guess I would point out something we wouldn't necessarily be aware of, but probably will be talked about quite a bit, is the construction and demolition waste. And they've proposed having a pretty steep fee hike for just random material being brought up as construction or demolition waste versus if it's sorted out into concrete or steel or whatever else, and it's easy to go ahead and handle that material. There's certainly an indication that that's going to be a pretty healthy discussion within those communities on what that rate structure is. And they heard our concerns about biosolids and what that could do to our ratepayers. And so that's been brought back to the same cost that it is now. So that's a good thing. along the lines of what we were discussing, they introduced their new education and outreach specialist, Rebecca Weeks. And so that's good to have that on board. And I'm sure, as we discussed, we'll want to go ahead and interface with they, and also Boise's got a pretty robust program, one that's got a couple of different flavors to what we do, but making sure that that we don't suffer some of the things we've suffered in the past, where there was one message coming out for Meridian and a different message coming out for Boise residents and stuff. We'll make sure that communications make it clear that, as was mentioned, if there's a difference between the contracts, that it's clear that there's a difference between the contracts. And but it's nice to have a point of contact with the county on that. As I mentioned, we went ahead and discussed the leaf collection and the holiday wire collection, and there was quite a bit of interest on both of those. And there was a fairly robust discussion about times when someone might approach the county on waiving fees. And I think there's going to be a fairly clear procedure in place if someone is approaching the county to have fees waived to some extent. There was the examples would be if there was a need to go ahead and clear a property or a park or something like that, something that would clearly benefit the whole community and not end up benefiting a certain person and such. I think we can expect that to be broadcast sometime soon. And when it does come out, I'll make sure it gets passed down. But there was just basically a round robin discussion at this point on the subject. And I would kind of like to take the time here as we start talking about it to identify a particular activity that was brought to my attention that kudos to the community. When Republic took over the transfer station nearly 10 years ago, at the facility was a robust feral cat community of 20 plus cats. And that's not something that's uncommon to find feral cats around landfills and transfer stations. But they made a major effort within a few months to go ahead and collect the cats and go ahead and get them in for some veterinary services, including neutering, spaying, and such. And to the extent if they were healthy, to go ahead and release them in the area around their facility there, or if they were young, there was the opportunity for the cats to be tamed and to go ahead and be adopted into someone's household. As I said, there was a little over 20 back there when they started this program. And since that time, they've captured another 16 and given them the veterinary services and gone ahead and brought back the adults to go ahead and keep the rodent and bird population under control in their area, but also to supply some animals that, some cats that could be adopted out. And they've run this by Central District Health. Let's see, reading this the way it's said on this, Central District Health was contacted early on to confirm Republic Services TNR, that being the trap, neuter, and release program, was acceptable. The regulators agreed that a managed cat population would help control rodents and birds outside. And so they currently have a healthy group of about 10 to 12 cats that are helping take care of rodents and birds around their particular area. But just want to highlight something going on in our community where people have recognized something that could have been a problem and turned it into something that's worthy of recognition. And with that, that takes care of everything on our agenda. Are there any comments for the good of the group at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one follow-up from, I believe, the October 27th meeting. It was the meeting that I think item 2 on our agenda was to review the 2022 rates. And being a newbie, I was asking questions about rates as they are portrayed in our contract with Republic Services. And I understood that contract was rather old. On March 16th, it will be 38 years old. And asked where would I find out information? Sayard provided a lot of information, and Joanna provided a lot. And then I did a lot of research in city council ordinances, city council resolutions, minutes from city council, minutes from this commission, all the way back to 1984, and condensed it. It's not everything, but that's 13 major documents. And then I would just go through the documents in chronological order from the oldest to the most current. And all I did was make observations. And then when I saw something, knowing that it may have been corrected at a later date or addressed at a later date, not always corrected, I just noted either an observation or a recommendation or a suggestion, and then went to the next document and the next document and the next document. City Attorney Bill Neri was a little hesitant to have a subcommittee. That was the discussion, because it would be out of the sunshine, and I understood that. So not to step on any political or any procedural toes, I only sent a copy of a 7-page typed letter to Steve, our chair, and to Sayard. And then I've got the document here myself that I've reduced to a PDF file. I just scanned all the pages. And it's interesting to see what has taken place and what hasn't taken place. And I'll just give you one example that I asked the question, what was the status of our involvement in if the city was going to be renegotiating or trying to bring up to date a contract with Republic Services, something that would be fair to Republic Services, fair to the city, and our job as commissioners, fair to the citizens. We covered 90+% of the cost of running of what is paid to Republic is not out of the city tax collections, it's out of our pockets. So I think that's who we represent. And I was told, well, that it's been passed on to Public Works, and they would be working with Republic to look at if a new contract is going to be generated or something. And I don't know what the status that is. And Sayard, I'm sure, can tell us. But one comment, and then we'll see what she has to say. It was back at a city council meeting on March 13th, back in 2012. Council persons, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, Zaremba and Bird and Roundtree all stated in a motion that they desired that the resolution that was going to be drafted by city attorney for this, but that involved both the city and the contractor and would be brought to the next city council agenda. That turned out to be resolution number 285, was to have language in it that stated this commission was to be the third party sitting at the table negotiating that contract. As far as I know, that was ignored, even though city council passed it. I couldn't find any place where it ever became part of a resolution or ordinance, and I could be wrong. But that's why I thought it would be important that some representatives or this committee be involved, maybe not after the fact, but during the process. Anyway, you all are welcome to take a look at this. It's just copies of city documents and my own observations. It's not like we're taking any action. So the status.
So yeah, I haven't come across that March, what you're talking about, so that'd be interesting to read. Yeah, and resolution 285 doesn't talk about SWAC, it talks about the introduction of a recycling program into the city of Meridian. Right now, similar to what you did, I have gone through many of the documents. We've also looked at different rates in other cities, and I am in a process of compiling all that information, and then that actually goes to then Joanna and Alex, and then up to Public Works Director, where she reviews it. So that's the status. That's where it's at right now. We're not actually working with Republic Services. We're just reviewing the documents and reviewing rates across the Treasure Valley.
So I think it's safe to say that that subject is being worked at this point and is an ongoing activity at this point.
Yeah, that's safe to say.
So is it fair to say that at some point in time, whatever recommendation comes out of Public Works would come to the commission for our comments before it goes to city council? I mean, that's what we're here for.
That would probably then, we would probably work with Bill Neri to see the full process. I'm not sure right now. I just know that, you know, I'm at that stage, and then when I'm done with that, then it goes to the Public Works Director, and then she reviews it and then talks to Neri about the process and the procedures.
Sayard and I chatted about documents that should be given possibly to commissioners when they get appointed, so they don't walk in blind and ask too many questions like I did. But that could be part of a document that each one of us would receive, unless it is going to be completely replaced by a totally new contract and not 14 different or 13 plus documents that you've got to read all of them and see what was replaced by what. It's probably time.
I think I would go ahead and say thank you, Sayard, for helping to put together the, shall I say, the employee manual that the commissioners have on it, kind of creating a virtual manual at that point. I think I would take that under, to recommend you take it under consideration to expand that, maybe to go ahead and have the additional documents available, if that's okay, or if, depending on whatever the recommendations of staff are on the path to proceed on this subject.
And I did, I think it was either October, in October, I did send an email to everybody with the new document or updated ones and kind of a guidelines on how to read things. But certainly that's a lot of information to send. So if someone was interested in a certain resolution and needed some direction on how to find it, or if I can just email it, I think that would probably be a better course of action. And then instead of just sending out, because I think that'd be more confusing.
I think this is a really healthy discussion that we need to go ahead and get to ground at some particular point. But yeah, you bring up a very good point that it's always useful in the having the spotlight on everything to be able to have this information available, but how to make it available is a good conversation to have. And I think keep that in mind and kind of give us some idea of how to go ahead and do that as we go forward. Again, with the suggestion that was made, if it turns out that these are all going to be superseded, then that's one answer. If they're not going to be superseded, then that's another question pursue.
Yes, and so for now, I guess an interim would be, before public, works the director makes a decision, would be if there is any, I mean, all of these are public and it's on, if you just go to the website and look at, the muni code or go to the clerk's office, all those are on there. But if anybody's interested in a certain resolution or a date, certainly email me and I can direct you into that specific document. If for some reason the contract does change, then of course, there would be updates. But for now, I think just looking on the website or contacting me directly would be the most effective.
Mr. Chair, the problem wasn't getting the document. The problem is to know what document to look for. So when you go through 30 some odd years of city council minutes, 30 some odd years of minutes from the commission, looking for bits and pieces of action and comments and try to see, was that later converted by resolution or by contract or by amendment or by extension or by ordinance? It was probably about 50, 60 hours worth of research. And I learned a lot. I think that if that's what we're going to have and we end up with no new contract, every commissioner ought to have that or something like that on a web page or in a PDF file so you can see the history. Because it was clear from the discussion, nobody sitting around this table had all that background going all the way back. And it was kind of interesting to see what has actually happened back from SSI days all the way forward.
Rand, do you have something akin to a table of contents or a list of documents?
I can create one. I put them there. They're just colored tabbed in chronological order. And then I did a 7-page summary up front in the same order and said, here's what this is. Here's something I observed and a suggestion or just an observation. And then to see if it was corrected at a later date. And when I found it was, I referred back to it. And the preface on the document says, don't read it and assume that what you're reading is the final answer, because it may have been corrected later. And I was trying to be real careful not to point fingers, but just observe. But yeah, I can get you the whole thing.
Well, that would be fine too, but I think at a minimum, a list of the relevant documents being made available to all the commissioners so that they know the list of things.
Sure.
Know what they're asking about would be golden. So,
And Sayard may want to add some to it that she has found since that just give more explanation. I might have missed something happened at a city council meeting as I went through what was available online.
okay, well,
Sure, glad to.
yeah, if you could provide that list to myself or Sayard or both. So we'll make sure that it gets around to all the commissioners so that they've got a reference list.
Yeah, I think that sounds good to share all your work with everybody.
Well, check with Bill because there was some concern that I just didn't want us to do anything out of the sunshine. That's why I just did it by myself and just sent the cover letter to the two of you all, our chair and Sayard.
Well, Mr. Chair, I appreciate all the work that's been put into that. History has its place, but my core competency is not reading ordinances or contracts. And I correctly chose a field that doesn't do that because it wouldn't make any sense to me. But I do appreciate as a new council member, I think we had a packet that was given to us 3 or 4 years ago that kind of helped me kind of get started. It wasn't into that far back in history, but definitely just that executive overview of the current state of what our role is and the ordinances is helpful. I don't know if I'm as interested in the iterations of how we got to where we're at, but absence of a new contract, that would be helpful just to have that kind of that executive overview to help a new person. And then if they like to, they can go get to the weeds. Someone else can go with them, but I don't know if I. Anyway, that's a great topic. Appreciate all the work you're putting into that.
I think Sayard and I can probably go ahead and point out the date for that email that had a lot of that information connected with it. And if you need it retrieved, we can accomplish that too. Thank you. That's a little over an hour's worth of effort, but I think that we definitely started off the year on the right foot. So our next meeting is February 23rd. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.